John McMullen at the game Saturday night. A lot of NFL news and notes, so let's dive into them now. John, as the Eagles hold on to beat the Falcons on Saturday night, and you wrote fourth in the season for the Falcons. Kind of take us inside that final play there. They went after Jalen Mills. You know, I had said on the show on Saturday, John, during the pregame, that I thought the Eagles were going to win the game with their defense needing to make a play, on fourth down or whatever to get, they were going to have to make that play to end the game and win it, and they went after Jalen Mills. So fourth in the season, take us inside.
Yeah, it was interesting they went after Jalen because he had the lockdown game. He was tremendous throughout, had only given up one reception, and that was the play before that got him down to the 2-yard line. So they tried to go back. It kind of tells you, when you have a quarterback like Matt Ryan, it kind of tells you just how dominant the Eagles' front was, because you generally don't want to sprint out a quarterback like that, because when you do that, you're cutting off the field and essentially, obviously making it far easier for the defense. But they felt they needed to move the pocket, and they went to their playmaker. And the interesting thing is, after the game, the Eagles knew the play. The Eagles knew the play as soon as the tight end came in motion. Nigel Bradham said that. Jalen said it. So they were prepared very well. And it was a 50-50 ball going to perhaps the best receiver in football. He got close, but he didn't get it. And the Eagles survived, and it's on to the NFC Championship game. But, I think if you go all the way back to when Carson Wentz was injured, we kind of told you, and we've said it time and time again on the show, that the margin of error is going to be smaller with Nick Foles. It's still there, but it's smaller, and these are the games you're going to have to win. They're all going to be that kind of tough drag-out game, and in this case, it was 4th and 2 at the 2-yard line. Season on the line for both teams. Yes,
4th and 2. They convert the fourth down late in the game to Julio Jones. I mean, you had the throw to Sanu that they challenge. I mean, it was just that final series, the tension in that building got to be unbelievable.
Yeah, it always is, and you kind of saw it last night as well. When you have great quarterbacks, it's tough, no matter how good your defense is. When they have a chance to win the game, there's a reason those guys are who they are. And it seems they always make it very, very difficult. And in the case of Drew Brees, he actually got his team in the lead. In the case of Matt Ryan, he got it down to the 2-yard line. That's what makes those guys great quarterbacks, and it's what makes it easier for those teams. But we constantly talk about it. Everyone says, well, Matt Ryan's better than Nick Foles. Well, the Eagles won the football game. Drew Brees is better than Case Keenum. Well, the Vikings found a way to win the football game. It's not just quarterback versus quarterback, and people have to stop thinking that way.
Well, no, and we said, I think a lot of the reasons why people liked Atlanta was because they liked Matt Ryan than Foles, but in the end, the Eagles had a better team, and they were more prepared and better coached.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt. They were well prepared. And remember, they should have been. They had the extra week, and that's part of the advantage of having the bye and why you fight so hard for it, along with having the game, obviously, on your home field. And certainly, as we said, defensively, they knew the play. So that's helpful when you know what the other team is going to run. And offensively, obviously the Eagles are much more limited with Nick Foles at quarterback, but I still think they put together a heck of a game plan. They got Nick going with those RPOs, especially in the third quarter. And you look up at the stat sheet, and it was pretty darn good.
They had talked about all week watching the 2013 tape of Nick Foles. Did they implement what they saw in 13 for Saturday night?
No, I don't think they did. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, this is their offense, and they're not going to change their offense drastically in 2 weeks. I mean, that's just not the way you do it in the NFL. And the entire season, the Eagles have used more run-pass options than any other team in football. And they continued that against the Falcons. I just thought they executed better. And Nick played better. There's no doubt. And all of that comes into it. But, no, I don't think they changed their offense drastically. They did go a little bit up-tempo, but they always do that. They did it with Carson. They do it with Nick, and they're going to do it again on Sunday night at times in the game. So it was the Eagles' offense, and it's going to be the Eagles' offense next week.
All right, John McMullen's with us. 32 rushes. Not a lot of yards, but they stuck with it. Surprised?
No, because, again, I talk about those run-pass ratios. It's generally involving the personality of the game and whether you're leading or trailing or whether it's a close game. The Eagles want to run the football. And if they're in the lead or if it's a close game, they're going to run it. And they're going to have a decent ratio. If they fall behind, they're going to pass it. So I've never been one of those people that overreacts to run-pass ratio. I think Eagles fans in general, because of the Andy Reid era, they're constantly overreacting at that aspect of the game. And I think I've always said, I think it's tremendously overblown.
I thought a key couple series in that game, too, the back-to-back screens. We saw a lot more of the screens, 5 catches for Clement. We had the back-to-back screens to Jay Ajayi there. So, they added a couple wrinkles, I thought.
Well, back-to-back screens, that you don't see that often. And Doug talked about that today, and he said he did it once in Kansas City, and he did it for that reason. If you get a screen, you're not expecting another screen on the very next play. And obviously the one that won 32 yards for Ajayi, there was just tremendous execution. Kelsey got a monster block to start it, and then Wiz got 2 blocks. He got 2 guys. So when things happen like that, it looks really good. And that's always been a big part of the Eagles' offense. It's just a matter of, can you execute?
The Eagles' defense, which we talked about that 4th down play to kind of end that game, but overall on the day, I thought, John, they were the best unit of all the games this weekend. The Eagles' defense was the best unit of the weekend.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I mean, obviously, Minnesota and Jacksonville have the bigger reputations and are the higher-ranked defenses, but Minnesota fell apart in the second half when Drew Brees got hot. It is a Hall of Fame quarterback. He was tremendously accurate, and that's difficult to stop, no matter how good you are. And Jacksonville, same thing. They're playing a Hall of Fame quarterback. And some of those touchdown passes that Ben threw, they were just amazing. So sometimes you got to tip your cap to the other team, and that's what happens when you play quarterbacks at that level. To me, if you look ahead, and obviously we'll talk about this game a lot during the week, but if you look ahead, these quarterbacks are not going to light up either of these defenses. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, that's where a lot of this would you rather play the Saints? Would you rather play the Vikings? I mean, it's a catch-22. You're either stuck against Breeze and a lesser defense or a better defense against Keenum. I'll take my chances with Keenum, but you got to figure out a way to score. The Breeze situation, I don't know that I'm all that intrigued by playing a quarterback of that caliber 2 weeks in a row,
Yeah, I can see people looking at that and going in that direction. And I've said since the injury, I said, that's kind of what you want to avoid. You're probably not equipped to win a shootout at this point. So if you have a quarterback that gets hot and can pile up a lot of points, you're probably not equipped to win that game. So from that standpoint, the Vikings, even though they're a better team than the Saints and more talented, they're probably a better matchup for the Eagles for that reason.
What about the Eagle offensive line? And, you know, we talked a lot about wearing down that smallish Falcons team. In the end, again, they didn't run the ball for a lot of yards, but they ran it a lot, wore them down, but it allowed Foles to get in a rhythm. And I think you saw the third down conversion rate was a big difference on Saturday than it was the previous couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, it had to get better. I mean, the last 5 quarters, Nick Foles in the regular season, the Eagles were 1 of 17 on third down. I mean, that's just statistically, it's got to get better. And it did, and it was significantly better. That's the important part, which is, you know, they were up over 40%, and that's also going to be a huge thing this week because the Vikings have the best third down defense since 1971, statistically. So that's the most important down in football, and it's always important. And the fact that the Eagles improved and were competent, and really more than competent, they were pretty darn good on third downs. That was a bit of a surprise, and obviously a good surprise.
Mm-hmm. Hey, you know, another thing, John, you were in that locker room after the game, and, you know, the underdog and the masks and the, you know, take us inside that locker room, just how disrespected that team felt.
Yeah, they did. They did. And I always think it's an individual thing. I shouldn't say, you know, certain guys felt really disrespected, and others just kind of brushed it off, and it wasn't a big deal. But, you know, they played that up, and Doug has pushed the right buttons most of the season, and he did it again. You have to give him credit. And they're underdogs again this week. So I don't know if you can go to that well again. Plus, you don't have the extra week of preparation. This is now a typical week, so you're already in the preparing, and you don't have as much time to hear all the pundits say you're not going to win the football game and things like that. And plus, I think a lot of people do think the Eagles are going to win the football game. So even though Las Vegas says they're an underdog this week, I don't know if you can go back to that well.
John, Fletcher Cox, we talked a lot about how his matchup with Garland was a big one. He won that going away.
Oh, yeah. He dominated. He was probably the best player on the field for the Eagles, offense or defense. And, hey, Fletcher always plays at a high level. I think people sometimes look at his contract and say he doesn't live up to it because he doesn't have huge sack numbers. And people get enamored with that and they obsess over it. But it's not always about actually sacking the quarterback. There's plenty of other things you can do to disrupt the game as a defensive lineman, and you saw that from Fletcher Cox time and time again. He and Brandon Graham dominated that football game and probably were the two best Eagles on either side of the ball. And they're going to have a chance to do that again because Minnesota's offense is banged up. They've had to move guys around, and it's average to begin with. So it's very similar to what they saw against Atlanta, and it's another opportunity for those guys to dominate.
Yeah, John. When you look at, you know, what Philly did on Saturday, a lot of, you know, they got off to a slow start. They threw the pass, which was a quacker that they get the penalty on. Then they fumble that leads to 3. But they really didn't get moving until the second half of that game. I mean, late in the game, late in the half, they got the field goal. They got, they didn't really get into a groove, though, in the second half. And I guess some of that's because they had that week off and stuff. So you would think that they should have a little bit more momentum going into this game. Whereas this week they looked like a team that sat around for 2 weeks and really a couple of weeks when you take the Dallas game and to some extent the Oakland game.
Yeah, that probably played into it because they haven't really been in this type of situation. And that's what makes the NFL playoffs great is the fact and why this sport is so popular. It's got a March Madness vibe. You saw it last night. I mean, this is it. You're one and done. And you can lose in spectacular fashion as New Orleans did and the Falcons and the Eagles go down to the last play, as we said, 4th and 2, both teams' season on the line.
Right.
It's really a huge sense of urgency, and the Eagles are in it now, and I think it will be improved. And I think one of the undersold stories of this week is both teams are coming off such emotional wins. Can you capture that again, or did you sort of use all that energy up? I think that's going to be something to keep an eye on.
Hey, John, you covered the Vikings in the past, so you know them pretty well. I know you still have a lot of ties there. Was this the better, situation for Philadelphia?
I do, for the reason you saw what Drew Brees can do. Although, outdoors, the Saints have never been a very good team playing outdoors. They have one playoff road win in their history, and it was here when Drew Brees beat Nick Foles. That's it. So I think both teams would have been it's very early in the week. We'll get towards predictions later.
Sure.
But I thought both matchups were pretty good for the Eagles, either way. Because even if you have Brees, I think there's still a lot of holes in that New Orleans team. And as tough as the Vikings are defensively, obviously you saw some of those Case Keenum throws that
yes.
That's why everyone doesn't believe in Case Keenum. As well as he's played at times, you're going to see those throws and you say to yourself, what do you think?
Well, it reminds you a lot of the 13 Foles where he was throwing balls and guys were colliding into each other and things. I mean, they're not smart plays, but plays that just ended up going in his favor. Now, he's made some plays. The throw he makes on the 61-yarder, I don't want to take anything away from him, but I'll take my chances that him being scrambling around a little skittish back there and making the big mistake in this kind of moment on the road, I'll take my chances with a road playoff game for him rather than a guy who's beat you in that building before.
Yeah, and a lot. I mean, to me, though, that's also one of his strengths, and that's what differs. He is really – people don't realize how mobile he is. So he's one of those guys that can make plays with his feet as well and extend plays. So it can work in both ways. But he seems to have a little Brett Favre in him and not arm strength. But he's going to throw 2 or 3 balls a game that you have a chance to make a play on as a defender. And you just got to make those plays. If you make those plays, you're probably going to win the game. If you don't make those plays, and they have really good receivers, and they might come down with those jump balls, you're probably going to lose the game. So it's probably going to be that close.
Johnny Mac, the NFL News and Notes, it looks like Pat Shurmur, who will coach against the Eagles on Sunday, might be coaching against them twice a year. It looks like he's going to be the next coach of the Giants.
Yeah, so they can get – obviously, Pat, everyone knows him here, a long-time assistant under Andy Reid.
And a lot of people wanted him to be the guy to take over for Chip Kelly,
I advocated that, if you remember.
As did I.
Thought, yeah, I like Pat. I've always liked Pat, and you've seen the job he's done with Minnesota. And how effective he's been and the schemes that he's able to draw up, even with the Case Keenum at quarterback. I've said from the start he's ready to be a head coach again. I think this is very similar to the Eagles when they hired Doug Peterson. The Giants are looking in other directions. They got beat out for McDaniels, beat out for Patricia, and they sort of settled for Pat Shurmur. And I think that's going to end up being the best hire for him.
Well, and you know what? The Eagles might luck out in all this because their staff might stay in place.
Yeah, it's possible. I still think there's a good chance John DeFilippo leaves because he's out of contract, and the Eagles can't prevent him from taking a coordinator job. I think he would certainly want to step up to be a coordinator somewhere. So I think it's going to be difficult to keep him. And who knows, because Tennessee is now open.
Right.
And all of a sudden, because they need somebody to develop Marcus Mariota, and it wouldn't surprise me if his name starts popping up for Tennessee.
That's because Josh McDaniel's not going to go to Tennessee. It looks like he's going to Indianapolis to coach Andrew Luck.
Yeah, and I said, Matt Nagy, that was a strange decision because there were at least rumors that the Colts wanted him, and he chose Chicago. And if Andrew Luck can throw the football at all, I mean, that's a great situation. So you have to have, obviously he's got to be healthy, but if he's healthy, that is a great, great situation for an offensive coach.
And that would leave Tennessee, Tennessee and Arizona as the two openings left. So we'll see if Jim Schwartz has a good weekend, if his name resurfaces, but we haven't heard a lot about him. And then, as you mentioned, DeFilippo could be in the mix somewhere as well. So we're starting to get the head coaching stuff kind of ironed out. Those won't be official until at least after this week and potentially 3 more weeks. So if you're a Giant fan in Minnesota, you're probably hoping Minnesota lose. The Giants are rooting for the Eagles this week.
I don't know about that because they know they have them. And generally, obviously, Giants fans aren't rooting for the Eagles, and it's just a matter of time. And they're not going to change their mind, and Pat's going to be the head coach there. And it's going to be interesting because, as I said, he's well-known in Philadelphia. He's well-respected in Philadelphia. And you know what I like most about Pat Shurmur? He's not one of those closed-minded guys. His history, as I said, is with Andy. He's a West Coast guy. But he came to be Chip Kelly's offensive coordinator to learn about tempo and to learn about the good things of Chip Kelly's offense. And he kind of put that into his system and morphed the two together. And that's the kind of coach you want, a guy who's open-minded and a guy who takes the best stuff from certain coaches and implements it. I think it's a home run hire for the Giants.
Well, we'll see how he does this week. Because I tweeted this morning that this would be an interesting kind of, on the job. If I can show you that I could game plan against Jim Schwartz, you can hire me because we'll face him twice. You have a bad game plan, and the Giants say, Schwartz got the better of this guy. Did we really? You know what I mean? But the Giants maybe.
Well, they're not going to change their mind. But I will say the rest of this league, and even before so, I don't know how you cannot watch the Eagles' defense against the Falcons. Jim Schwartz all year at home. I can't believe he's not gotten more attention.
Yeah.
I really can't. Wow. And some of it might be personality because he's a brash guy, and everyone knows it. But he is a heck of a defensive mind. He's already been a somewhat successful head coach, and people can rip him for that Detroit tenure. But remember, they were 0-16 when he took over that team, and he had them in the playoffs 2 years later. That's pretty good. So I'm a little surprised he hasn't gotten more attention.
John McMullen at JF McMullen all this week with coverage of Eagles and Vikings and all the NFL news and notes right here on the Sports Bash on 97.3 ESPN. He, like all guests, up here via the Boardwalk Honda hotline. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Mike.